How should ChatGPT be used for SEO? Welcome to the Majestic SEO podcast and live stream. I'm your host, David Bain, and today we're talking ChatGPT for SEO. Specifically, is ChatGPT a great opportunity to speed up your SEO activities? And if so, how can you best use ChatGPT to enhance what you're currently doing? So let's get straight in there and introduce today's panel. So starting off with Garrett.
Hey everyone, Garrett Sussman, Demand Generation Manager at digital marketing agency IPO Rank. I'm the host of the SEO Weekly and the Rankable podcast, and excited to talk about this new technology that's impacting all of us in SEO.
Indeed, thanks so much for joining us. And next up is Alizée.
Hello everyone, I'm Alizée. I'm a French international SEO freelancer consultant, adding keywords to the list as an SEO would do. And I've been playing around a little bit with ChatGPT for a couple of months. I learned a lot and it saved me tons of hours. So excited to talk about this as well.
Sounds exciting. And also joining us today is Ken.
Hey everybody, Ken Magma Marshall. You can ask me about the Magma on LinkedIn, but I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Revenue Zen. Everything that has to do with organic growth, acceleration, and marketing, I'm all about, including SEO. And yeah, I've been as a CGO, I've been tinkering with ChatGPT since it came out, and I love to talk about the pros and the cons. So I can't wait.
Absolutely, thanks, Ken. And also with us is Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe. I am the Digital PR Manager at Salient Search Marketing, based in the northwest of England. I was very concerned about what GPT would mean for my industry, but I'm becoming warmer to the idea of it being used for productivity and not to hopefully replace myself and my team.
ChatGPT is quite a mouthful until you get used to it, isn't it? It's maybe one of the questions should it be rebranded for the general public?
Yeah.
But let's see if we get to that. And also joining us today is Gabriella.
Hey, Gabriella Sanino. I'm the co-founder of Level 343, an international marketing and SEO company out of San Francisco. I've been doing this over 25 years. So when ChatGPT came out, I was like, wow, a new toy. Let me take a look. And so I'm really, really excited to dive into today's conversation with a bunch of pros that I follow. So looking forward to it.
A bunch of pros and indeed representatives from Europe against the US. So let's see who wins in terms of knowledge bombs today. I'm sure it'll be equal. I'm sure it'll be great. Shall we go back to the first chap to introduce himself, Garrett? Garrett, how big a game changer is ChatGPT for SEO?
Well, I think the thing I'll caveat everything with is that we are at the nascence of these types of tools. AI generation tools have been around for 10 years, 10 plus years. That said, I feel like the accessibility of ChatGPT, that it doesn't have like the friction that you'd have from some of the other paid tools, is going to open up a lot of productivity opportunities, efficiency opportunities. And I think it is a paradigm game changer in the way that we can create content. It's not a replacement, but it's a tool. And I think it's going to open up so many opportunities for SEOs and content creators alike.
Superb. Okay, we've got 25 people watching us live at the moment. We'll probably even get more people watching us live. If you're watching us live and you've got an opinion in terms of how you're using ChatGPT effectively at the moment, let us know how you're using it. We'll discuss that. And if you've got any questions about it, how you should be using it in your type of business, let us know. We'll try and incorporate that into the conversation as well. Gabriella, you were saying beforehand that you're getting people that are not involved in tech or the SEO industry asking you about ChatGPT.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have a couple of friends that are professors here, whether it's Berkeley or Stanford. I mean, I don't mean to name drop, but those are the top universities in San Francisco. And they're calling me, Gabriella, because they know I work online and I work with SEO and content marketing and so on and so forth. And one of the questions was, how can I tell if my students are, doing their papers with ChatGPT? And I said, why do you care? ultimately, if they're doing the homework and they're actually learning something, and, because it's only going to give them so much information. They're still going to have to do the research. They're still going to have to, verify. They're still going to have to give you resources. They're still going to have to go back to, is this real? Is this true? And that's one of the things that I've noticed a lot of the different chat GPTs out there, the chatbots, from WordLift to Jasper to, their Bing, they're giving you the sources. And that's a game changer for me. I'm no longer having to just listen to what this bot is telling me. I can verify it. And, I've embraced it a little more. As Alizée said earlier, she wasn't sure whether she's warming up to it or maybe it was Joe. But I'm totally warming up to it. So yeah.
Alizée, do you care if your students use ChatGPT to do their homework?
Absolutely not. On the contrary, the students I have are in master's degrees in business and some of them in IT. If they don't use it right now, where the consequences of them using it are maybe having some little issues with the school administration, well, they might be behind the wave when they start working, and I don't want that for them. So that's what I just tell them again and again, try it, use it. If you have an idea, submit it to ChatGPT, try that. In the worst case, it works and you learn something, or you gain a couple of hours, or like in my case, you start learning Python when it's been on your to-do list for the past 3.5 years, and you decide to try it out with ChatGPT and you actually learn something and create tools that actually help your productivity. So yeah, it's just full of opportunities and it's going to be there, so they might as well get used to it.
Gotta be the attitude, right? Like how big of a game changer. It's like, okay, when technical SEOs are super upset when Moz and Ahrefs comes out with these crawls, they can't charge $5,000 anymore for a checklist. And then all of a sudden, you get no code tools like Bubble and developers are like, it's the end of the world. Well, they're going to happen anyway. Progress doesn't stop. So let's sort of lean in and tinker and figure out how we can use this stuff, right? So we don't get left behind. I think you're all spot on.
Is ChatGPT going to replace SEOs in a couple of years' time, Ken?
I've been saying this for 3-4 years now, that SEO as a function will continue to change and morph into more around user experience, user engagement mapping, and search experience. We've already seen that with all the algorithmic updates with RankBrain and these different user experience type updates. But I think people get so caught in the weeds of their identity that I'm an SEO and I do these things to game Google's system, versus how can I leverage knowledge and technology and human, ability and bandwidth to help people move through their, customer journey or user journey. That's all that I really care about, is helping users and customers solve problems. So yeah, I do think they're going to be replaced. They've always been replaced by tools, but the ones who don't get replaced are more like, I'm the director of this tool and the advisor, the trusted advisor to my client or user, and they win because they use the tools to augment themselves properly. So that's what we're doing over here, or trying to.
And Joe, you work in digital PR, specifically reactive PR newsjacking. Are you actually actively using ChatGPT in your content generation?
Yeah, I was really worried that it would be a negative thing, that you would see people newsjacking really quickly by just creating this content that they hadn't checked on ChatGPT, and they'd be using it to kind of snipe people that were, doing really well thought out, helpful analysis. And actually, I don't think that is the case. I think journalists that use this content they're smart people. They can tell a really good thought out piece of thought leadership from something that's been generated quite quickly, and perhaps is missing context or missing human lived experience, which, much like SEO, journalism is about speaking to people about their experiences. But actually there are things that I'm using it for, subject lines. If I've got to newsjack a story and my energy is going into creating that content, checking that content, getting it signed off from a client potentially. I don't always have the time I would like to spend to create that really, really witty subject line. We've been trialing using the product for that, and it's working really well. It's not quite got the hang that it needs to be a really short, snappy piece of writing yet, but it can generate enough of them that we can then, as humans, edit them and chop them down, and we've got a list to pick from. You know, there are, for newsjacking, yeah, it does have its uses, but content creation alone isn't really one of them.
So how do you practically use that then, Joe, to actually get it to learn what you like and how to improve on what it's done previously? Do you actually continue on the same thread of the conversation to do that?
I'm sort of training it, I guess. You know, you ask it for a couple of subject lines around a topic, and it'll come back with something maybe 15, 16 words long. You know, that's too long for a headline. It's too long for an email subject line. I'll just go back to it and say, hey, can you give me this again, but shorter in less words? And you know, I guess eventually, if enough of us are doing that, journalists and digital PRs, it'll learn and it'll get quicker at it.
Very quickly, I'm sure if there are tens of thousands of
Yeah.
journalists doing the same thing, if not more. Garrett, how do you actually practically use ChatGPT yourself at the moment?
Yeah, so the way I use it is I will, big caveat, which we all touched on at the beginning of this, is that understanding the limitations of the tool is really important when you go to content creation. Like, we're not at a point where you can just be like, create an entire blog post and expect it to have value. So I use it primarily in short bursts, short snippets of content that are easily editable and easily verifiable, because a lot of folks are trying to use these workflows as shortcuts. And we're realizing that at this point, the technology still requires a lot of human handholding. So I'll do, to Joe's point, a lot of ideation to inspire me to then take my content to the next level. Because the reality is, ChatGPT is trained on so much information starting up to 2021 on the internet, including things like Reddit, So there's a lot of content out there that can be helpful, especially using it specifically for evergreen. And I also kind of like creating use cases with it to basically have it spur my creativity for specific support evidence without necessarily linking, but ideas of how things can be supported in a use case perspective. So and just touching the surface, I mean, I'm not going to get into all the technical SEO opportunities there, but those are my main use cases right now.
And Ken, your role is CGR, Chief
CGO.
Growth Officer. CGO. I didn't even get that right. Yeah, it was
Fancy millennial talk.
Yeah, exactly. This shows I'm not a millennial. But anyway, how do you practically use ChatGPT in a growth type role?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was about treating it as a playground. I mean, they literally have a playground for opening. But so here's just a few things off the top of my head that Joe and Garrett mentioned. So if you're going to be doing PR, I was like, okay, I'm a B2B SEO agency, and I want to do some guest posting. I need a list of 20 companies that offer guest posting, and they need to mention that on the site. And it was able to replicate that. So that's some PR targets, very basic. Content workflows. Here's a target term. Create an outline for me with this tone of voice. After you create that outline, I want you to make it in this. This is our brand voice, like, and codified it. This is our brand voice. Now rewrite the outline for our brand voice. Now create section by section, like Garrett said, an article for me based on the outline you just gave me. So that's content production. I wanted to see if I could make tools with it. So coding, somebody mentioned that. That's brilliant. And so we're buying a home. So I made a home loan calculator and a few different prompts, right? It gave me the values, the average mortgage prices in San Luis Obispo, and then it built the formula with those averages. So, I mean, that's just a few things, and that's what my role has been, playing with the upper and lower limits, knowing that the tool can only realize about 5,000 pieces of text in terms of previous history of training. So you can't train it endlessly. And then it can only create about 1,000 words at a time. So don't try to create a 5,000 word blog post. It can't do it. So really just exercising those, the tool and figuring out what its limits are has been my day-to-day for the last few months, as much as I possibly can get away with.
I would imagine that a great opportunity could be to actually train it on a very specific task, and then ideally be able to sell the ability to do that task to someone else, or to have multiple people train them on a specific task to actually get them very, very good at that specific task and sell that. Do you see that ChatGPT may actually evolve in that kind of way?
I absolutely think prompt engineer will be like an up and coming hot job. If not, I don't know what the other top 5 jobs will be, but I just know like VAs will change their titles to like prompt engineers, and they should. It's really amazing. And some people don't have the time to learn how to train these very specific, nuanced prompts. To Garrett's point, there's way more limitations, I think, than people realize, like than the opportunities right now for that interface. I think the AI, the language model is great, but the tool is very limited. So I think that's going to be a pretty big opportunity, and I think people should charge people for things they know how to do. So
And
yeah.
to Ken's point, actually, when you were asking earlier about whether SEO, whether ChatGPT is going to replace SEOs, I think if anything, it's going to evolve. It's really hard to predict the role of an SEO in the future, whether that's more of a kind of merging of editor, content creator, strategist. Because you also mentioned, Ken, this whole idea of like mapping out your keywords. Gianluca Fiorelli, who is I Love SEO.net, wrote this great post in June all about the messy middle and how Google is continually trying to refine our queries, and whether they integrate BART at some point. As an SEO, we're always going to have that human strategy of addressing every point of the funnel, and that's just going to look different as these generative tools kind of evolve.
I loved Ken saying that VAs are going to be changing their job titles to prompt engineer, and then perhaps doubling their hourly rate as a result of doing that. Alizée, what kind of prompts have you been using, and what kind of tasks have you been training for?
So I've tried a few things. In terms of pure international SEO, I've tried doing translations just to see how it was doing. Not good. Well, good for the simple stuff. I asked it to translate a piece of text from the New Yorker that mentioned the word turbocharged, which is very complicated to make sense of in another language. The result was appalling. So anything that has some figurative speech is not good. I've tried doing some cultural adaptations for content ideation. So asking it to create content for a bakery in Strasbourg or a bakery in Bordeaux, which are in 2 very different places and sell 2 very different types of pastries. It wasn't capable of giving me anything that would differentiate. But then I tried it about a gardening blog in Finland and a gardening blog in Morocco, and it understood that the problems gardeners in those 2 countries were facing were drastically different. For Morocco, it suggested some content around irrigation. For Finland, things about the type of produce you might want to have in cold climates and things like that. So I tried a few things here and there. I'm still figuring out exactly what to do with it. And then it's been a lot of conversational stuff about, teach me how to do this tool in Python, because I want to understand and do something that is useful for me and that I understand. And I also use it as a colleague of some sorts, as a sounding board. Anytime, because as a freelancer, I'm very alone in my day-to-day, and sometimes I'm just not sure, and I get it. You get in your head and you think about things and you're not sure what to do, or you're not sure how to say things, or to write an email to a client when it's 8 o'clock and you just want to go and eat your dinner, that kind of thing. And I just put out my ideas, my bullet points in there, and ask it to do something for me. And that helps massively to simplify my to-do list, make it a breeze. Those little tasks that I would spend hours on, and the ones you think about all day long, procrastinating to the very last minute because you really don't want to do them, because they're just so simple, but you really don't want to do them. For those things, ChatGPT has been a lifesaver and has helped massively with just the mental health even side of freelancing, honestly.
Gabriella, you talked a little bit beforehand about the dangers of using ChatGPT for certain tasks. So what SEO tasks shouldn't be automated using ChatGPT?
Well, ultimately, there are a few things that I've been discussing with a couple of colleagues where we do use, ChatGPT, whether it's to give us a block of content because we were stuck, we couldn't think of something new. One of the things that I've noticed, going to Alisée's point, the translation. No, don't do that. I mean, even Google Translate doesn't get it right. So, especially when it comes to cultural nuances, the differences between, north of France versus the south of France, same thing with Italy, same thing with the Middle East. So, in that aspect, they still haven't become sophisticated enough within the parameters of what the prompts are and the prompts aren't. Another thing that I actually even told a friend of mine, which one of my colleagues gave me a link, and I'll share with you, David, to add to this discussion, was where it gives you the prompts already, because a lot of people have no clue how to use the prompts. It's a wonderful website. It's got examples from Q&A, grammar corrections, summarizing text to commands. And maybe they should get paid more, Ken, because they are going to become engineers when it comes to creating, the prompts that are needed. So in that aspect, one of the things that I shy away from, because SEO does take a lot of time, and a lot of people, think, oh yeah, no, you can do it, turn it on and walk away. You can automate it. No, that's not what automating means, especially when you're responding to Q&A. That's another way that we've noticed people are using it, where it provides automated responses to common customer inquiries. It's great. Boom, you ask the questions and it gives you 3-4 answers. Guess what? That's done, right? And you throw it up on the, the Q&A of the back end. You give it to your web developer and you say, here's some Q&As, please add them to our contact page, in case people have some questions. So in that aspect, it's great, but you still have to go back and you still have to read and you still have to make sure that the recommendations, as Alizée mentioned, whether for the gardener from, Finland versus the gardener in Morocco, if it's actually a factual, if it's true. I don't want to go outside of SEO, but we've seen what it's done outside of SEO, where it's pulled in political figures that supposedly said this, but they didn't. So there's some dangers. But within SEO, I don't know. I love it. So I'm a cheerleader. I'm not, poo-poo on that. I'm a big GPT cheerleader. So
I'm staying on dangers for a second. Does anyone have any concerns about the facts that ChatGPT actually comes up with, and whether or not maybe politically or the information that they come up with is based upon some kind of angle, but not necessarily completely impartial? Does anyone have that kind of concern? And if so, do they do any checks on the content, the answers that it comes up with?
I think, I mean, one of the things, obviously, working with journalists day in, day out, and I used to be a journalist myself. And if anyone knows anything about the libel laws in the UK, misquoting anyone, whether it be a politician or a head of business, is a genuine risk. It could sink a company, it could sink an agency if you get a libel suit slapped on you in the UK. You know, you use it as a researcher. That's what it is. I think it was Alizée that said she treats it as a colleague. If I had a junior colleague that I was employed in a research capacity, I would take their work and I would use that to inform my work. I wouldn't be publishing it without checking it. I wouldn't be sharing it with journalists or with business leaders, for example, without fact checking it, verifying sources. One of the things that one of my team, one of my data analysts has been using it for is asking it to suggest data sets. His
Mhm.
job for me used to be that he would go away and look for data sets that we could do big data-led digital PR campaigns out of. he said when he first started using it, he was asking it for this data, but he realized that actually it's far safer to use it to get it to suggest for places where he can look for the data sets, where he can then go off the platform and go, take that to Google, take that elsewhere to an academic journal, and see it in its natural habitat, rather than just trusting that the data that was being provided was accurate and could be used for a campaign.
What about using ChatGPT in conjunction with other software? When I've been a fan of Zapier in the past, and I've used it to tie lots of different pieces of software together. I noticed that you can connect OpenAI with Zapier. I haven't actually tried it yet, but is anyone actually actively pulling ChatGPT together with other software to increase the effectiveness of its parts?
I've actually tried it with Google Sheets and Danny Richmond's tool about generating alt tags for images. And then I created another one to generate meta descriptions and meta tags, just to have a look at what the results were. And it saved me a lot of time, just having that first basis to work from. And it works well for me. You just have to, ask ChatGPT to explain to you how AppScript works, and then integrate it. But it's for I see it as an educational project more than first and foremost an educational project for myself. And then if it results in a tool that actually saves me hours and hours, then it's great. But at least I will have learned something. So that's the way I've used it with Google Sheets so far.
Yeah, I think I haven't used any, I haven't integrated it, with any of like their API functions, but I think there's some efficiencies that people in our industry can use. Like, so Gabriella, Joe, I think you hit it spot on that the QA is terrible, like quality assurance, the human aspects of QA, and then also it literally just lies, like inaccurate information, and it's, it doesn't know any better, right? So every time we do any piece of content, it automatically gets ran through a plagiarism tool, through Grammarly. And I mean, even if you just blanket accept, it's almost always going to be better than if you don't. Or, GPT for Sheets and Google Docs, that extension is amazing. Like, let's say you have a seed keyword list, or you need a list of things to be pulled and imported into your tools. It can format the headers for you and then auto generate each column based on the information you'd want to query in your tool, right? So I think there's a lot of efficiencies like that, of tools you can use to augment the limitations that anyone can use and use for free in most cases. But I'd be interested to hear about more advanced use cases if anybody's got them.
All right, Joe or Gabriella, anything else you'd like to add in terms of tools and marrying ChatGPT with other software?
Oh, Joe, you want to go first?
I'll go, and I'll be honest, this isn't my bag. I would need to ask the program how to do that. I really did like what Alizée was saying actually about using it as a teacher. I've spoken to colleagues, friends, people in the industry, and they are doing exactly that. They are getting the program to train them on things that perhaps they don't have time to go and do a course in. Perhaps they don't have, the resources in-house where they work, or they're a freelancer. So yeah, I am really fascinated, like Ken said, by some of the more advanced use cases I am seeing, the APIs people are using with it. I will be a very interested observer, but I would not be the leading light on that at this stage, I wouldn't say.
It's experimental for everyone at the moment, isn't it? I mean, Gabriella, do you want to add anything to that, or should we just
actually,
move on to...
no. I'm piggybacking on what everyone has said. I'm the cheerleader waiting for the next, wonderful article or API integration so we can test it. I'm not techie at all. I leave that to my techie team. But I have started to look at other tools that are integrating, and not to give people plugins plugs, but, a couple of Italian engineers, sono Italiana, so of course I'm going to plug my people, topically.io. They grab all the keywords, they do mapping. Wow. Andrea Volpini, same thing, with WordLift. He's doing all So I'm
Yeah.
letting the real people that know how to play with this do it, and I'm just, following. So that's
Yeah.
what I have to add to that.
And to Gabrielle's point and Dave's point, just the whole API is a different animal than ChatGPT, because with the API, you start to get out of the limitations of that interface and that sandbox. So, for instance, on LinkedIn, I've been seeing Kristen Tinsky of Fractal has been posting some fascinating Python scripts. One use case that was really interesting was all around audience research and persona development. So, basically, being able to train it to spit out, on the persona type that you want for the industry niche, all different types of, insights and attributes for that persona that you can then use to map out the content for your keyword strategy. So there's a lot of opportunities and creativity once you get outside of the ChatGPT interface. And you're using the API for those tools. And then obviously beyond that, I think beyond SEO, there's going to be a lot of content creation opportunities, in terms of social and, as Ken was mentioning, around voice and brand, really being able to train it on larger libraries of your own documentation to then produce more accurate like voice and brand content that you want to create. So I expect that to accelerate. And then, we've seen a lot of weirdness with Bing's integration and Sydney. And, it's going to be interesting to see how that ultimately impacts SEO in general and the way that people use search, which I think we'll touch on.
I'd also like to talk a little bit about how this is impacting the way that you use employees or outsourcers. For example, do you actually come up with the system yourself and give them the system and ask them to do it? Do you give them more leeway into actually coming up with a better way of managing ChatGPT? Gabriella, you mentioned that you've got a couple of people that do some work for you. How have you gone about this?
Well, I use a couple of tools, not just ChatGPT. I use Jasper as well, and I use SEMrush. They have a content development template, SEO, So I take a couple of things. For example, I'll take a title, drop it into the template, and then, SEMrush gives me some ideas of other places that are, working on the same thing, gives me links. So I look at that. It also gives me entity keywords. So I take a look at that. So I grab the titles, the URLs, the entities. I put together, a synopsis, and I send it to the writer and I say, write me this. You could do that with any writer now because you have so much more information than just, here's the topic, here's the synopsis here. Now we have not just meaning to the article, but relevance. And now we have a way to, put it all under one umbrella where we have entity, knowledge graph, links, resources. Wow. So my editor now just has to go in, make sure the grammar looks good, make sure that the image is fine. So it's cut not just our workload, but also our budget. I no longer have to pay, the editor, the writer, and the coder to make sure it all works, right? Because I've already, checked off a couple of things that the ChatGPT has done for us. So in that way, it has helped. And I know that a couple of my tech guys have used it for structural data, to double back and check it, and again, you have to know how to ask. Because I said, well, it doesn't work. I've tried it. I said, do this, and it didn't give me anything. And so she came back. She said, well, you're asking it wrong. This is what you need to ask. This is the following structured data can be added to a surface page. And then you give them the service page, about that particular keyword in the city. And then boom, all of a sudden I got all this code, which is Chinese to me. I have no clue what it means. I know it's, you're supposed to put it on the page, but it gave me all the important information, the name, the description, the image, the services, the type, the city. I was blown away. I was like, wow. So now we don't need to hire that extra, step, because it will, obviously my techie person has to go back and check it, but it's cut her time by hours, especially when we have huge sites that we have to either audit or we have to, write new content for. So yeah, there you have it.
Ken, what Gabriella said there, you're asking it wrong, is absolutely key, isn't it? Because if you don't, I guess, give enough context and ask in the right manner, then you're not going to come up with the optimum manner. So do you have a kind of a set of questions and a way of setting up that you provide team members with in order to optimize their use of ChatGPT?
Yeah, Gabriella, I think that's so funny because I've had those moments and heard them from the team as well of like, this doesn't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm always like, I think the fallacy there is that we don't know enough to know what we don't know. So let's not assume that it can't do something. Rather, we don't know how to tell it what to do. And so I think the first step for us was really just after I got done playing with it is saying, okay, everyone has to play with this. I don't care how you play with it, but you're going to go play with it and we're going to integrate this in the near future. So tell me what you come up with. And everyone's confused and a little frustrated and like, this thing doesn't work. Then it's like, okay, we gave them some parameters. So we're going to create an article and everyone's going to bring their favorite about their favorite subject. And you give them a sandbox. So an SOP, little operating procedure of, well, here's how to make you a brief and suggest terms. And so I think just getting people to understand why you're using any new tool or new process is the first step, the buy-in, the explanation, letting them play. Then they can inform the process, but you have to give them a playground or a sandbox to sort of exist within. Or I think it's overwhelming if you're not a CGO who's sort of a mad scientist. Like it can be overwhelming and maybe they don't want to fail. So for the team members, I think setting the stage, giving them somewhere to play in, a sandbox set of procedures, and then refining it with like very intentional coaching and training is the way to go. And that's sort of how we've done it internally. But yeah, without the right understanding of something, the nature of it, any tool, you're not going to be able to get the right output. And so we always challenged our thinking. I still do myself, but also the team. You can't say this doesn't work. You have to continue beating your head against the wall with other people's help until you definitively know that it doesn't after you feel a level of mastery. And I think that's a much more beautiful way to exist than just saying something doesn't work, so to speak.
That's such a good point, Ken. I mean, it's so about experimentation right now, and everybody's experimenting. We're all learning how to do it, and there's no real instruction manual because like one word in your prompt can change the output. You just think about search. Like if I go to Google right now and I ask, is coffee bad for you? Versus if I ask, is coffee good for you? I'm going to get two different sets of search results, and the same thing applies to ChatGPT. So the way we typically think about it is setting the context, like what information needs to be, whether it's voice and brand or who's speaking or what you're trying to answer, giving examples of what you expect the output to be, if you can, because it's machine learning, right? You're trying to give it, this is what I'm looking for. And then what is the actual output? So if we're talking, you want an essay, you want 5 bullet points, you want, 3 examples, you need to specifically, if anything, ChatGPT is going to make us all better communicators, I hope, because we all suck at actually like explaining what we want, whether it's from colleagues or, users, consumers, whatever. This really forces you to be literal and be intentional, to Ken's point, exactly what you're looking for. And that's one of the best ways that I help, talk to our colleagues or clients or whatnot.
And Joe, you were nodding away there with quite a bit of what Ken and Garrett was saying. Anything you'd like to add?
I think that the point that this is experimental and we're all experimenting and we all are mad scientists here. I think it was Ken that used that terminology, which I like. I think for me though, it's leading by example. So my team aren't going to feel comfortable to spend the time experimenting or to test these theories unless I am. And I think that's what kind of got me to kind of jump in head first after being quite hesitant at first about whether I wanted to implement this as part of our working life and whether I wanted to kind of trust that this would become part of our day-to-day work with SEO and digital PR. I think talking about sort of students, Alizée made that really good point that it's going to be here in the future and people will be left behind. And I don't want my junior team members to be left behind by a tool that's going to become really integral potentially to SEO and digital PR and potentially digital marketing in general. So yeah, I had to kind of jump in and start using it so that they would feel comfortable, that they would feel that it's allowed, we're allowed to spend that time and we're allowed to try and fail when it doesn't work. And lastly, that point about it making us better communicators. One of the things that I am trying to get better at with being a leader and just in my personal life and my day-to-day life is being a more effective communicator. Whatever role I've done, whether it be a journalist, a PR, a content creator, communication is key to that. And anything that can fine tune my communication to me is something that I want to be a part of and I want to learn from. So yeah, I really enjoyed that point.
Lovely. Okay, now as a final question, I'm going to ask everyone, how will ChatGPT impact the future of SEO? So you have a minute to think about that, but just before we get to that question, Alizée, just a little thought on how you actually use ChatGPT or encourage your students or outsourced workers to use ChatGPT. So do you like to give people a set of prescriptions in terms of these are the prompts that you should probably use, or do you tend to leave students and outsourced workers to it and see what they come up with?
So the way I see it is that this type of tool can do a lot of the like boring work for us, which leaves some computational human brain power left for creativity, which is what we are good at as humans. So I don't give prompts or things to my students because they already have 1,000 ideas a second. It goes really fast in those classes. So I just tell them to, well, sorry, Gabriella, to throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks, basically. Apologies. But just to try anything they have their mind on, to be creative, because using creativity with superpowers just can only do good. So yeah, that's kind of the way I see it, is just to tell them to try anything they want. And that's the way I see it as well. Anything I have in mind, I've tried doing knitting patterns with ChatGPT. I've tried doing recipes. I've tried doing loads of things. Anything that comes to mind, I just try it out and see what happens and see how it behaves and see how I can fine tune the prompt I'm giving it. So it's more about, yeah, experimenting, being the mad scientist, as everyone said, and which I absolutely love that that analogy. And yeah, remember that it's one tool that can give us more time to think about those creative things that we as humans are capable of doing that these tools cannot yet. Maybe we'll see.
Well, we'll see indeed, because the final question, as I mentioned, for everyone is how will ChatGPT impact the future of SEO? So let's go back to Garrett for that one. Garrett, what's your thoughts?
So I think there's two angles that I'm thinking about it. One is a sort of democratization of content creation. If you think like when it comes to image creation, like if you use Midjourney, like I'm not an artist, but I can design all sorts of really cool things all of a sudden. I think for people who aren't necessarily writers by nature, it's an opportunity to explore their own creativity in a craft that they might not be great at. On the other hand, I think if you are a great writer or a content creator in the context of SEO, you're going to be able to differentiate from everyone who is using the tools, whether it's through, augmenting your own creativity and then just leveling up. But at the same time, EEAT, when it comes to like Google and SEO, expertise, experience, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, that's still going to be human. I don't think that's going to be, negated by this tool in any time in the near future. So I don't think SEO is dead, but I also don't think that it's 100% roses and rainbows and unicorns.
Alizée, roses, unicorns, SEO is dead, somewhere in between. Where do you lie?
I'm more on the unicorn side of things usually. Just say it like that. I think it will change the way we do SEO, because it will, well, simplify or gain in productivity on all those tedious tasks and help with creativity, as I mentioned. And I think there's it's also, I think I haven't been SEO for as long as other people in this webinar, but I haven't seen the SEO community gathering around the topic as much in a long time. And it feels like we're starting to, remember that we all had a common goal, and we can all be friends and creative together. I told you I'm a unicorn on the unicorn side of things. But I think it's been a long time since people haven't gathered around the topic as much and found it exciting as much. So I'm very curious to see where everyone's going to take this.
I think it was a long,
Not
long
predicting
time
anything.
ago. I'm thinking back to 2006 and every SEO jumping on a WordPress plugin called My Blog Log and everyone getting exceptionally passionate about that. But that was a long time ago. But I'm sure people have got more passionate about that, other things since then. But Ken, what are your thoughts on how ChatGPT will impact the future of SEO?
Yeah, I love what you just said about being a unicorn. I'm very optimistic about technology as well. And like, I mean, I could echo what Garrett said, but I think the two biggest things are one, and I've always said this, that people should always try to find their zone of genius and hang out and play there. And so I think we get so bogged down. I mean, content can be beautiful and more creative typically, but in SEO with like the tactics, and none of that ever mattered. It just was gimmicky for a while because you could do it and it kind of worked a long time ago in SEO. But what I would say to people is one, think outside of the tactics and how it can augment your day-to-day workflow to allow you to be creative and stay in your zone of genius. That is the ultimate goal, I think, for workers, not to take pride in the minutia, even though you have to do that sometimes. It's really those big leaps and creative leaps and bounds. And the second one is being expansive in your thinking. So if you're not a coder, and Gabriella, I love how you speak about that, the techies, because I say things like that in my head too, the nerds. But if you're not, think about though, if you have a small business client who's in real estate, like I use that example, could they have a tool that could help potential new home buyers in a way that you would have had to not shell out, you can't shell out $5,000 for a developer, but now you can serve your customers, your users better. So maybe, or Alizée, to your point, could you learn something that you couldn't as a small business owner or something like that, or an SEO? So being expansive in your thinking of what your role is and saying, how can I make my client's experience or the user's experience better? And then the second thing is, how can I get rid of some of these really detailed tasks that I don't enjoy, but that take up half of my day, so I can really go have fun and stay in my zone of genius. So that's what I'm trying to do every day. And I would encourage everybody to do the same.
Lots of nuggets there, Ken. Thank you so much. Joe, what are your thoughts on how it's impacting the future of SEO?
I think what we've all established here is you can go very fire and brimstone with this. SEO is dead; it's the end. Or you can be very rainbows, unicorns. I'm gonna elect to be a rainbow today and chase a unicorn or chase a rainbow. I think that it can be an incredibly powerful productivity tool for digital PRs, content creators, SEOs. I think that it can enable us to get down to the meaningful work that we do, the meaningful human element of what we're able to do, and spend more time really finessing the stuff that we're good at. Or, as Ken and Alizée both said, learning something new. Getting really involved in learning, new skills and what it can teach us and how it can open up our roles and what we do. That the points Ken made about small business owners and the power this puts into their hands, or perhaps people in developing countries that don't have the money for the kind of SEO tools that perhaps we do in the West. These tools, we all know we spend a lot of money on them. Could this democratize things a little more and open the playground and level those playing fields? So yeah, interesting to see what will happen with it.
Wow. Gabriella, Joe shared fire and brimstone. That's just about as bad as it gets.
Right. And I don't want to age myself, but I already have. I started when there was no SEO. So, I had to embrace that when Google came out with SEO. Then I had to embrace, the next shiny little tool over here. Then I had to, I don't know how many times I heard SEO is dead through the years. So as Ken said, SEO is constantly changing, and it's probably going to change again. And it's a matter of which way are we going to go with that. It evolves regularly, often fed by technology, by the latest ChatGPT, the latest information. So I think AI tools like ChatGPT will become just an extra tool to put in our, I don't know how you say it, in your farm, in your wheelhouse. So it just is going to be with better data perspective, right? So I used to tell people, oh, it's like throwing a noodle, on a wall, except this time it'll be a targeted noodle. It's not just going to be a noodle, right? So those are some wonderful things that I'm excited about. So there is a future. It just depends on how you want to use it. Just like anything, we embraced Google, and now we're all kind of like, well, Google, maybe Bing is better. And no, I'm just kidding. But Bing has been coming out with some pretty interesting things with their little ChatGPT, but that's another discussion altogether. But yeah, I do see that many people, are throwing noodles, testing. I love that scientific mad scientist a comparison, because it is very much still a new, regardless of whether we've been using it for the last year or 6 months. Look at how SEO has moved from EAT now to EEAT, right? It's like we're constantly coming up with new acronyms, new this, new that. Ultimately, we're trying to help the client, period. And if ChatGPT is going to help me do that, then let's go with it.
Well, it certainly sounds like there's going to be a part 2 for this discussion. There's so much that can be shared, that has been shared. Wonderful thoughts from on our panel here as well. Bago, Ramon, Daniel Forbearable, and Final Addiction Rehabs. The names are getting stranger by the minute. Thank you so much for commenting on our YouTube channel live. Try and ask questions next time if you can. But it's great to have you watching live. I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to the Majestic SEO podcast with Garrett. Garrett, where can the listener find out more about you and where to find you?
Yeah, iPullRank.com. You can find me on the Twitters and the LinkedIns. Just name Garrett Sussman, a whole bunch of S's and R's and T's and all that jazz. But Twitter is where I hang out the most, trying to do the LinkedIn thing. Really hard to make it happen.
Superb. Thanks for coming on, Garrett. And also Alizée. Alizée, where can people find you?
Same as Garrett, Twitter, LinkedIn, using Alizée Baudez with a lot of Z's instead of a lot of T's and S's. And I have my website, alizeebaudez.com, if you want to check out what I do.
Thank you, Alizée. And Ken?
Yeah, type in Ken Magma into ChatGPT and see what happens. No, I'm just joking. You can go. LinkedIn is where we hang out. So Garrett, maybe we can trade tips about Twitter versus LinkedIn, but hit me up anytime. Everything I've ever learned is in our resource center. So we try to share knowledge openly here at Revenue Zen, or reach out. Consultations are always free, as they should be. We like to help first and decide if we're a right fit. So reach out and definitely talk to me about ChatGPT, because it's like one of my favorite topics right now.
Thanks so much, Ken. And Joe?
I can be found on Twitter, although I'm much more professional on LinkedIn, like most people. I'm usually moaning about the state of British weather on Twitter, or the politics in the country at the moment. It's at Joe Marie, that's the French spelling, so M-A-R-A-E, O'Reilly, and that's my @ on everything, so you can find me there.
Thanks so much for coming on, Joe. And Gabriella?
Hi, you can find me definitely on Twitter. I've been on Twitter since 1909 is what I tell people as a joke. LinkedIn, I've been trying to start embracing it a little more, because, everybody's telling me, well, you need to be more professional. I'm like, Vach, I haven't been professional since 25 years. Why start now? But you can find me also at level343.com. I do Google my name. Don't put me on ChatGPT. I did that, and it made me just do a double take. Who is that person? Because it wasn't me. So, but I am going to put Ken's name to see what comes up. Now you've got me curious. And again, thank you so much, David. I appreciate it. And wonderful chatting with you guys.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on. If you'd like to join us next time, sign up at majestic.com/webinars. And of course, check out the other series at SEOin2023.com. Bye-bye for now.